Ladies and gentlemen, this is David Miricatani with another episode of Matt Chat. Today it is my pleasure to be joined by the state chairman from the great state of Oklahoma for USA Wrestling, Kevin Crutchmer. Kevin, thanks for taking the time to be on with me today.
No problem, David.
How's life in Tulsa?
Hot, getting hot. It's been kind of cool, but today it's definitely different.
As the state chairman, I wanted to have you on the show because of junior duels. We're doing this interview a few weeks before junior duels, and I'll probably actually go live during junior duels. I want to let's start with that. What all is your involvement with getting such a massive undertaking like junior duels to be hosted in Tulsa?
Well, David, the process started about 3 or 4 years ago, trying to keep it here in Oklahoma. Archie Randall ran it for many years there in Oklahoma City at Oklahoma City University.
Right.
And when it came time for it to possibly move, we rebid, was put back into place there with USA Wrestling. It took some negotiating, but with the help of many people in our wrestling community, we were granted the junior duels again. We're going on our third year. It's been, a pretty exciting event. We've had, again, great wrestling here in Tulsa. And, we decided, since we had such a great relationship with the Tulsa Sports Commission here in Tulsa, that we would try to bring it here to Tulsa. And, it just happened to work out.
Yeah, and when I was coaching in college, it was one of the events that you really needed to recruit. For people that, don't know a lot about junior duels, and I can certainly chime in on this as well, but maybe talk a little bit about some of the kids that are now college stars that have come through and wrestled in that event so people can kind of get an idea of the quality of the event.
I mean, shoot, that list is probably endless. Just since we've had it, I can name some Oklahoma guys, my son Kyle Crutchmer, Chandler Rogers, Cade Brock, Joe Smith, and then maybe from out, other states, Tommy Thorne from Minnesota. Let's see.
Dayton Fix, probably those kind of guys are going on to college, right? It's kind of hard because there's such an array of kids in that building, especially with my role being the director. I don't get to see a lot of the wrestling because I'm so busy with the logistics part. For sure.
But I do know that there's no doubt that each state puts together their best lineup per weight, in the junior division, and they bring, every one of their hammers they possibly can. And I know last year, Ohio showed up here with a team that, I'll just be honest with you, I don't think everybody was prepared for it. They were really, really good.
When I was recruiting, that Ohio brought in a team that had the Stieber brothers and Chris Phillips and a bunch of David Taylor was on that team. And yeah. People were like, what in the holy hell happened here? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, exactly what happened last year. I mean, they got into a pool, started running through people, and then they get into, the gold and silver pool or the gold pool and start running through people there. And they were just really good. I mean, they were solid top to bottom.
Explain the format of the event. Like how many mats? Is it a bracket? How is this all run so people can kind of get an idea of what we're talking about?
Well, we run 16 mats. We run 15 competition competitive mats. We run a 16th mat as an exhibition mat for kids that might not be the top guy, but they came with their team and they want some matches. So we run that pretty much solid for about 4 hours during the event. But it goes brackets first. Everybody's seated according to the criteria that USA Wrestling puts out. Each kid that has been successful at some level gets a possible seeding point or 2 points, 3 points, 4 points, and even up to 5 if you're a national champion.
Okay.
You can seed it. I believe it's 15, maybe 16 kids number-wise can grab seeding points, and then whoever has the top points go into these brackets, A bracket, B bracket, C, and D. They wrestle through those brackets. Top team goes into to the gold pool. Let me back up. The top 2 teams go into the gold pool. We do wrestle for a true second in the bracket to make sure the correct team is in the gold pool. And then, then everybody goes, we have a silver, I believe a red, a blue, and then even a yellow-green pool. So everybody gets matches, even though they might not have been as successful or if they won their bracket.
So let me jump in and make sure I understand it. So let's say you have 32 teams there, and you've got an A, B, C, and D bracket. Then those teams get ranked 1 through 32, and get put in the brackets proportionally. Like 1 and 32 would be in a bracket, then 2 and 31, et cetera. And then you guys literally wrestle it out like that, and the top 2 teams go to, like you said, the gold, whatever it is, the championship bracket, and then those teams are going to end up placing 1 through 8. But literally, there's even a 25 through 32 bracket being wrestled. So one of the great things for kids when they come to this versus like going to Fargo is even if you're not great, you're going to get a ton of matches, and a lot of college coaches are going to get a chance to see you, right?
Yeah, years ago, before they changed the format, kids were getting, if they wrestled both styles in the duels, they were getting 20, 22 plus matches.
Right.
A lot of talk was brought up over the last, it's probably been 3 to 5 years ago. We changed the format because we were afraid as, state directors and coaches that our kids were getting too banged up wrestling that many matches before Fargo.
Right.
So they backed it off. Now, your max matches on any given or either style is 7. Now, there is a couple of examples where a team could get an 8, especially in that very bottom pool of yellow-green. Depending on how many teams there is, they could catch an 8 match. But the majority you're going to get, if you were the starting 32-pounder for Oklahoma and you wrestled every match in freestyle and every match in Greco, 14 matches is probably your max.
I got you. Okay. And so I think one of the other things that people should understand, and then I want to get into the logistics and all the people that you have helping you, but I think one of the other things that people need to understand is because it's teams, if you want to see the matchup, like if you want to see, and I know they're from different time periods, but if you want to see Kyle Crutchmer wrestle Chris Phillips, that's a lot easier to find than it is at a place like Fargo where you got to kind of run around and wait to see which mat they're called to and run over there and look at it. Like, when Oklahoma's dueling Ohio and it's going to be the 9th, 10th, 11th, whatever match that is in the count, it's a lot easier for folks to be able to watch matches like that. Would you agree?
Yeah, especially since TrackCast is available there. I mean, even people at home, they'll have a better idea logistically of when that match is going to happen. So they could even, if they were at work or if they were, home with your kids, whatever, they could find, that time to possibly sit down and watch the match.
Yeah, and let's talk about that because I've heard from some of my guys in Oklahoma how you and your staff are utilizing track wrestling and TrackCast on not only for junior duels but on a statewide level to make your events smoother and a lot more successful. And I mean, I do work for track, but by no means am I a tech guy. I do these podcasts and I really enjoy talking to folks like you. But my knowledge of how this stuff, how it works is just, it's not there. So explain to me what you guys are doing, how you're doing it, who's helping you, and how other states could follow suit if they wanted to.
Okay, well, first I'm going to piggyback you. I am not very tech savvy myself.
All right.
But I will tell you that in the last 2 years, we've gone completely to track wrestling with all of our youth and our freestyle Greco events. So year-round, we're using track wrestling. We'll be in our 3rd year since our local season has just completed next year. And what we've done is we've got some volunteers that have become very, very efficient in the running of the software. So what happens is each tournament can, rent that person or, pay that person to come in and run the tournament for them on track wrestling. And I think we usually pay about $200 for that person, and it makes it real easy on the tournament director, especially if they're like me or you, not very tech savvy.
For sure.
And what we've done is we have purchased what we call traveling track wrestling sets. We've got 4 of them of 6, I believe, maybe it might be 8. And what we've got is we've got computers, TV monitors, and 2 Wi-Fi hotspots in each traveling box. So if you have a match or a tournament of 6 mats, you can set them up logistically. You got the wiring, the electrical cords, everything with it. All you got to do is pick up the box, take it to your event, set it up, pack it all back up, and bring it back to where we have a central location that we take everything to. So it gives our tournament directors, an easy, less than zero financial, expenditure to be able to use that equipment so they can run the track wrestling and make sure that everybody's on page. Now, what we've done is we've got some volunteers here in Oklahoma, and I'm very fortunate to have these people like, I'd like to mention a couple of them: Pam McCall, Courtney Slover, Dusty Golowinski, Nicole Digwilder, Stephen Schmidt. Stephen Schmidt wrestled at OSU. They have become our track wrestling gurus. And, if there's any questions, if there's anything going on, even if they're not the director of the track wrestling at a tournament, all we got to do is make a phone call, and they can log in. And the nice thing about it is they can log directly in from where they're at and help us, fix a mistake or change something or whatever it is. And that's why I think track wrestling has become such a tool for, especially us, is even when you have a mistake or a question, it's very simple to fix. And, that's just kind of what we've done here in Oklahoma. We used to handwrite those brackets. Everybody, when we switched over, everybody was like, "What are you doing? You've lost your mind." But I think everybody in the last 2 years has figured out that once you get the tournament started with track wrestling, there's not a better software out there for tournament running.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And it also sounds like, you to kind of piggyback to what you said a few minutes ago, that, these teams their seeds are calculated on their points based on USA Wrestling criteria. So I'm assuming that's also something that you can integrate with that software and just, it automatically calculates who's got the most points and all those kind of things. And since all those results are loaded into track, even if you forget that a kid maybe placed at Fargo or something like that, those kids would all get credit for the points they deserve, it sounds like, right?
Yeah. It's just handy. I mean, when it comes to running tournaments, you've done it as long as I have, and back in the day, one of the biggest things that I see that track does is, you remember how it was when you used to write those handwritten brackets?
Yeah.
If someone circled the wrong winner,
yes,
and you had that messed up, it'd be 2 rounds down the road before they figured out that it was wrong, and it was almost unfixable. Well, now kids are so used to, as soon as they win or lose their match, they look for their next match number, and if someone put the wrong name, they immediately know.
Yeah.
So they're down there saying, "Hey, I won that match," and now you fix. Now you're not in the second or third round before someone catches it.
Yeah, for sure. So you mentioned the names of those folks that are crucial or super important to helping you make this successful. If other people are listening and they go, "Gosh, that sounds like the right way to go," but let's say they're not in a neighboring state, like they're not touching Oklahoma. How did those people go about getting so smart with the software? Is it just a matter of them going on and, just literally going through the modules and learning, or how did they go about doing all that stuff?
Well, we had a couple. I'll be honest with you. I think there was 2. Stephen Schmidt from Tulsa, Oklahoma, is a very tech savvy guy. He's unbelievable with his technology ability, and he kind of had an idea. And in those first couple of years, what we did is we had some track wrestling training. We had one at my school. We had one back on the west side of the state. And Stephen actually came in and kind of gave everybody a little bit of probably a remedial type of training. Mm-hmm. And then some of these ladies that I mentioned have just kind of taken off and run with it. And the neat thing again, I don't know for sure, but I guess there's a test tournament you can go in and test and kind of, finagle a little bit to see, what you want to do, how to do this without, having to set up an actual tournament. And I think our ladies have just, what they've done is they've just gone on there and they've practiced enough, so now they just understand and get it.
Yeah, you can troubleshoot that way for sure. So,
sure, yeah.
Yeah. So the other thing, when I spoke to you privately in preparation for this, was you told me how important your referees and officials and your volunteers are to making, not only these events, but the other events or not only junior duels, but all the events you run all over the state. So, tell me about some of those people and how important their contributions are to wrestling and how they make your job a lot easier.
Yeah, just like I said, with our track wrestling people, our referee organization is probably as good as we got, because we got two of the top referees, not only in our state, but, nationally and internationally, with Jerry Coombs and Danny Blackshear. They've got the organization here, the Oklahoma International Wrestling Officials Association, and we've got multiple, younger guys, even high school guys that are repping. We got some college guys that are, they're getting, a little extra summer money. And then we've got a host of just adult men that have wrestled at one time or coached that have just decided this is a way to keep their hand in the mix. And I can just tell you this, those guys are crucial in your local state events, because if you don't have quality referees, tournaments just don't run very smoothly. And I know that Danny and Jerry have done an amazing job with the growth of our referees and their development. And it's really made our job, especially mine as a chairman, when it comes to, events and having issues, to have them in charge and having a real good, young, vibrant staff of referees.
Yeah, and I think that's obviously when you're running 16 mats and those guys, it's duels where, you got to have an outside, it's multiple officials. I mean, for people that, maybe don't follow freestyle, I mean, you got three referees working every match, and you got to have a guy sitting out. So it's just the pure quantity of good referees you have to have is pretty intense. So. Yeah,
and Dave, I can tell you that since I've been running this junior duels, I can tell you we have 70 referees coming in for the junior duels, 11 of them for Oklahoma, so multiple others from different states. Actually, each state is required to bring one referee, which you don't even have to even ask. I mean, that's just a given.
Okay.
And but we have 70 referees go up for 16 mats, and they run the 3-man mechanics on every mat. And it's a 4-day event, so those guys are gone, for 4 or 5 days, and then most of them probably have to take vacation days off their jobs. So, I mean, when it comes to volunteering, referees probably volunteer as much hours as anybody, because, like I said, I don't think they even get paid. I know I don't pay for the junior duels. For them, all I do is house and feed.
Right.
So I'm pretty sure they don't get any, monetary, compensation. So they have to, it has to be a desire that you want to be in that organization and be a part of the event. Because it's probably not, the easiest to get away from work for 4 to 5 days, 3 times a year, probably 4 times a year. If you do schoolboy, cadet, junior, and cartel.
Yeah, they're definitely doing it for the love of the sport, for sure. And I'm friends with, a bunch of the Missouri referees. I know what you're talking about. Let's jump topics a little bit, because I definitely want to talk to you about your involvement, not only, with freestyle, but also with bringing big events to the state of Oklahoma. I went, to the Big 12s this year in Tulsa, and was actually the first live event that I did anything for track wrestling in, and got to see the arena there and how well run that tournament was. And I know you guys, put a lot of time into bidding that. And, so tell me about your impressions of getting the Big 12s and how, I know you have it next year as well, about that bidding process and how you felt like it went now that you've had 1 year under your belt doing that.
Well, first, that was about a 2-3 year process, getting that thing, the bid, available where we could put one in. I have to give a lot of credit, though, to the Tulsa Sports Commission. Ray Hoyt is the executive director there, Vince Trinidad, Mark Hargett, Keith Point. Those guys done an amazing job. And the nice thing about it is they kind of use me as a liaison for the logistics parts, because those guys really aren't the wrestling guys. So they, there's just things, like how to do the finals, do we use carpet, do we light, do we do stuff like that, and that's where I kind of came in, with just helping them on trying to figure out great things. But, The event was amazing. I'll be honest with you, I had a little bit of a personal, getting that deal because my son was a senior there at LSU and got to wrestle in front of his home, city and friends and family there for his senior year, and he ended up winning his second Big 12 title. So it was a great event. And, when you talk about bidding and getting it in, I think you just have to prove that you can handle it. And I think the Tulsa Sports Commission has proven that they are a wrestling savvy organization, and then, with us being Oklahoma USA Wrestling, having such a close relationship with them, it was real easy to provide the correct information to get that bid in.
Yeah, and the OSU and the OU fans specifically really showed out. I mean, did they ever give you what the attendance numbers were for that event?
It was about, I think, 11-7 over a 2-day period.
Yeah.
I think it was a little short than we thought maybe it was going. We were going to end up with it. I think we were pushing it for like between 12 and 15,000, so it wasn't real short.
Right.
OSU brings a huge crowd. OU's building their program back up. Their crowd will be bigger. I'll be shocked next year. And then I've seen where I think UNI's trying to get into the Big 12. I don't know if that's a done deal or not.
I think it is. Yeah.
So, I mean, I can see us pushing the 12 to 15 mark next year, and I think you've seen probably on TV, or I think you were even there, Dave, that one side was completely full, and then the people were, sparing a little bit on the far side. The corners, the bowls weren't as much people, but, the nice thing about that venue and the way they had it set up is there wasn't really a bad seat in the house.
Correct.
Everybody felt like they were a part of the matches, the festivities, whatever. And and OSU had a record-breaking, performance, and just worked out really well, especially for OSU fans that came in there and spent their time and their money here in Tulsa.
Yeah, I think the other thing that maybe gets lost a little bit in this, that from the work you guys did, is it gives all of those Big 12 schools the feel of a real prep tournament to the nationals. That, I mean, there was a while there where that was a 4-team tournament, and I mean, basically it was like a quad, and you'd wrestle the semis and then wrestle the thirds, and then you'd take this big break and they'd wrestle the finals, and it's really an event. You could have probably ran in 3 hours if you wanted to, and now it's a legitimate 2-day event, 2 weigh-ins. And, and I think that's really good from a coaching point of view, because you want your guys to get ready for that. I mean, obviously the nationals are a 3-day weigh-in, but, if you're making weight that third day, it means you're on the podium, and guys generally find a way to make weight if that's the thing. So I would assume. Go ahead.
And I heard some coaches, I didn't hear all of them, talking about how the stimulation of being in the back tunnels preparing for matches was really close to what it felt like when you get to St. Louis.
Correct. Yeah.
And that's a big part. When you got kids that are back there, maybe stressing a little bit, maybe their first time at the event, whatever, if they can just have a little bit of logistic feel of what it's like to compete, even at a smaller venue, which, the BOK probably isn't much smaller, here in Tulsa, but I think that it was just an all-around great experience, not only for the fans, but in the city of Tulsa and all the businesses downtown. And I think the coaches probably felt pretty solid too about getting their kids prepped for the the national event.
I know for a fact they did, because I did interviews down there, and that was a major topic with those guys. That the tournament, you guys made it bigger, and the kids need to feel bigger. Have the feel of bigger tournament, because, you can't, sort of do this little dinky tournament and then all of a sudden the lights are super bright when they came to St. Louis, or, next year Ohio and Pittsburgh and on down the line. That as much as you can simulate that, like you said, the feel in the tunnel and, the fireworks and people running out and a big crowd and all that, obviously these kids are getting good younger and younger and wrestling in big events, but it's still really important. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'll tell you something else too. The crazy thing about those guys from the Tulsa Sports Commission, as the event was going on, we were on the phone talking about what we could do next year to even make it bigger as the event was going on. I mean, what could we do? How could we set it up different? Is there something we could do to make the crowd more excited? I mean, it was a constant feel of what can we do to make this thing even better. So I'd be surprised if us and the Tulsa Sports Commission don't come up with something even more eventful.
Yeah, and I agree. And it actually segues nicely into what I was going to talk to you about next. I think that I'm good friends with Chris Roseman here at the St. Louis Sports Commission, and they've held the Nationals, I think, 7 times in the last however many years. And one of the things he stresses is what you stress, is that no matter how well you do, what can we do to make it better? And in their case, they go to the other sites that are holding it. In your case, you're looking at the other regional or national qualifying tournaments and talking to people in your world on how to make it better. So Tell me about your impressions of the NCAA bidding process, because I know Tulsa, put in bids for this last 2019 to 2022 cycle.
Yeah, David, I'm not real familiar, or I'll just be honest with you, I'm not sure how that all pans out at that level.
Okay.
I know that we put in a bid for the 2019-2020 NCAA championships. It just didn't work out for us. Not sure why. I do know that, there's just a lot of politics probably go on, behind the scenes that, I don't know about, or even, we don't know about here in Tulsa. But, we felt like we could put on the event here, and we're definitely going to probably continue to try to bid for it, in the future, especially if these guys that are with the Tulsa Sports Commission are still around, because these guys are go-getters. They want events here, and they understand how to put on great events. And I'm not sure where it maybe fell apart, or where it took the wrong turn, but we're not unhappy we didn't get it. It's just we're definitely going to go back to the drawing board, and we've talked about looking at maybe getting the NCAA 2 championships. We've talked about maybe getting the NAIA championships.
Right.
We've looked at maybe getting the Cadet World Championships. That's been brought up.
Right.
We're definitely pushing. Any event we can put on here where people will be proud of not only being a part of it, or just showing up and and being a part of the event. We're definitely in for the trial. Right.
And you said a couple things there that I think are interesting. Number one, from what I heard, I don't think Tulsa's bid fell apart. I just think there's a lot of really good cities bidding on this, and they can only pick 4. So I think you could have done a great job and just been 5th or 6th, and done nothing wrong. I think the other thing, which I literally had in my notes here, is the next question to ask you is, what events, and you kind of touched on them, like, the D2s, the NAIs, maybe the D3s, did not put words in your mouth, but things like that. I mean, maybe even the junior colleges with NEO being so good there. What other events do you either have coming to Oklahoma, or, besides the one you mentioned, like cadets and those things, what are some of the big events that you guys are targeting to try to get to Oklahoma?
Well, the NCAA was the big one. We were trying to get that. We're going back to the drawing board. Like I said, I've had it mentioned maybe the Cadet World Championships. That hasn't gone very far, but I have been approached with that. We talked about the NCAA 2 championships, trying to get that possibly here.
Sure.
And I think even lower, down on the level, the Southern Plains Regional is coming open for bid next year, and we're planning on putting a bid in to bring it to Oklahoma.
Nice.
Here's the thing. We're open. We've had dual team tournaments here that we've been putting on. We did like, I think it was a March Madness or a Southern Plains duel. I can't remember exactly what we called it, but we had multiple junior, middle school and elementary teams here at one of our local high schools. They wrestled about 11 matches in 2 days. We're just trying to build our brand as big as we possibly can, and get people to support, our quest for event based on our performances with, past events. And I think the junior duels is one that has definitely, passed the test. Like I said, I got a bunch of great people with the Tulsa Sports Commission, my organization, my administrators, my volunteers, our referees. And that event has just been something that everybody seems to really, really like. I mean, downtown Tulsa is really pretty. There's a lot of, things to do down there. There's a lot of restaurants for people that come in, and we really don't hear any complaints at any level from the Big 12 down to our junior duels and even some of our smaller events. So, but right now we're just looking at licking our wounds a little bit that we didn't get the bid, but we're moving forward.
Yeah, and I actually just thought of this, and I try to be prepared, but I can't believe I didn't think of this in doing my preparation. But what is your involvement with Jack Roller and all those folks with Tulsa Nationals and Tulsa Worlds, all those events at the little kid level? Because you guys have to be doing some sort of partnership with them, right?
No, we don't have any partnership with Jack and Roller Productions. He is his separate entity.
Okay.
Most of his events are, done through, I think, his Roller Productions. And we just kind of, our kids go and participate, and we, encourage our kids to participate. But as of right now, there is. Go ahead.
And it's another chance, though, for people to see Tulsa, because obviously thousands of kids are coming down there. So, yeah, I mean.
Oh, yeah. His events are amazingly big.
Yeah.
They're run very well. And there is some, and every hammer in the country usually tries to show up for either that 15 tournament or that. So, if you want to see great kid wrestling, those are two of the main events probably in the country.
For sure. So, how do you see your role in USA Wrestling benefiting, and I guess I should kind of preface this with, I just spoke with Cody Bickley, who's the national high-performance team manager at USA Wrestling, and he's focusing on, like you were talking about, the cadets and the juniors and the under-23s, obviously feeding into the senior level. But how do you see your role as the chairman benefiting the improvement of all age group wrestlers in Oklahoma?
Well, Dave, I don't feel like my role is probably as much as developing our wrestlers, because our coaches and our clubs and our parents do just an amazing job here. I still coach here at Tulsa Union. I have my own kids that I develop, but and I host one of the training sites we have here. And kids come in, but most of their level of technique and ability is coming from their club coaches. So, I have to give our clubs, our coaches, our parents, all the credit of developing our kids as fast as they are. It's an amazing to watch the level, to me, because I have a 12-year-old that's not even, he's almost going to be in 7th grade. So I'm talking about 6th grade and below. We have just got a host of hammers. And it's just amazing to watch some of these kids tournaments. I'll just be honest, at our youth state tournament, I just got up and watched the finals up that way up at the top of the Lloyd Noble Center and watched their finals, and I was just amazed.
Yeah.
The level of technique, the level of scrambling ability, the level of intensity, the level of just desire that these kids have. And it's just been so long since my sons are almost graduated, and my little one's just not quite as, into wrestling as my other two boys were. But, to watch these young ones just compete is just amazing. And I just don't remember that being that many. I knew we had tough kids, but I just don't remember having that many. And that's a credit to our organization, building an inclusion type of atmosphere for all of our clubs, our coaches, our parents, to be a part of the program. And it's definitely paying off. And, and we've had a bunch of kids come to our organization that have, especially, Chandler Rogers, Joe Smith, Cade Brock, my sons, they came through and they all had a very, very successful, season this year, and some of them are still there, some are graduating. It's really fun to watch kids, develop through our clubs and our coaches and excel, and then, eventually walk across the stage and graduate from a college and get their school paid for.
Yeah, most definitely. And, I'm a guy that when I coached in college for a long time, and, I looked at national championship teams, whether it was junior college at our level or Division III, II, I NAI, and especially at the Division I level, I think for a school to win a national title, it seems like in almost every case, half their starting lineup is from the in-state. Look at it this year with Penn State and, and the Ohio States and Oklahoma State, those schools that are in the top 3 or 4, Iowa, how many in-state guys they have on their roster. And it wasn't that long ago where Oklahoma was not doing well at Fargo. They'd have a guy here or there, but the depth was not there. And I'm friends with the coaches at Oklahoma State and Oklahoma, and I know that was tough for them because the better your state is, obviously you have a home field advantage in terms of in-state tuition, kids growing up wanting to wrestle at those schools, and it's improved so dramatically there in the last few years. I'm sure you're going to answer with, hey, it's the coaching and the volunteers, but I guess my question is, do you see how this improvement has happened? And from your perspective, how do you keep that improvement going? I know you said you got a ton of hammers coming up, but how do you make sure those guys continue to be able to thrive and that you create an environment where these coaches and these kids can do what they do best?
Well, I mean, that's a great question. I think the biggest thing is logistically and organizationally, we have to provide the best atmosphere for kids to be successful. And our organization has blossomed or bloomed or whatever you want to call it the last 3 to 5 years. And I'm not saying that it wasn't right before that. It's just, with the addition of our youth organization and broadening our board, our executive board and getting more people involved, I think everybody's kind of seeing the end product, which is, the NCAA, tournament and, possible, senior, level wrestlers. And I'll just be honest with you. I'm a big proponent that I think social media has really thrown a motivational factor into kids. When my sons were coming through, Flow Wrestling was just getting started. They actually was my Mid-America tournament here in Oklahoma was one of the first Flow Wrestling tournaments. I can remember Kyle winning the Reno Tournament Champions, and that was like the first time they'd been out there. And Flow and Twitter and Facebook and all these different levels of social media, I think has provided kids a motivational factor that says, hey, I want my picture on that Twitter site, or I want my video on that website. And I think it's kind of, really helped coaches help to motivate their kids to be good. And, one of the things here in Oklahoma is we try to really provide the best experience for our kids, and we try to make it as financially manageable as possible. And, we've changed a bunch of numbers here in the last couple of years to try to get kids that couldn't afford, and we got scholarships and you back up to what you were talking about. I remember getting on in a van when my sons were first year cadets with 8 total Greco wrestlers, cadet and juniors.
Yeah.
And last year, I think we took 138.
Wow.
Kids.
I thought you were going to say 50 or 60. So, yeah, that's crazy. Yeah.
And that was 7 years ago.
Yes.
And so I don't know exactly what the change is, but I can tell you whatever we're doing here, and, I've sat down with guys like Hardell Moore and John Smith and Eric Guerrero, and we've tried to figure out exactly what the big plunge is right now. And I just think it's just people are bought in, and coaches and clubs and parents. Just everybody's bought in, and they're wanting to see their kids be the next, Joe Smith, Kyle Crutchmer, Chandler Rogers, Davian Jeffries, Andrew Dixon, those you. I mean, they just want. I mean, those opportunities are there now that just might not have been, a few years back. And you go back to that level of Oklahoma kids on our rosters here in Oklahoma now. I'm a firm believer that attendance record against Penn State wouldn't have been that big if he wouldn't have had 5 kids from Oklahoma wrestling in that match.
I would agree with that. And I think, that's also how those states, like we said, Penn State is heavy with Pennsylvania kids and Oklahoma State heavy with Oklahoma kids and et cetera. So, yeah. And you're right. Cause there's some kids I help out with here in Missouri. And when, one of the kids I help out with, his match from the state finals was up on track, like the day after the tournament. And you're right. That's a big thing with these kids, the social media aspect of it. So,
Yeah, so go ahead.
You mentioned a couple guys that, that I'm friends with, and specifically in regards to what we're talking about, Hardell Moore. And I think the world of what he's doing down there with Oklahoma Wrestling Academy. So I know besides working, at this top-down 50,000-foot level on bringing big events to Oklahoma, and running the big events like Junior Duels obviously with the help of your volunteers and the people you think so much of. I know you have to work with the clubs as well. So what is USA Wrestling and Oklahoma USA Wrestling? How do you work with clubs like Hardell's and the other ones in the state like that?
Well, first of all, let me say Hardell's an amazing guy. There is not another guy that I know that's got the passion or the ability to take 300-400 kids in a club and somehow, some way develop every one of them. I don't know how he does it. He's got his own thing going on down there, but the Oklahoma Wrestling Academy is one of our bigger clubs. I think he had over 300 members during the post-fall season. I know that he is broadening his, future there. I think they're looking at possibly building a new facility and just moving forward with everything. And it's easy to be able to facilitate for guys that put that type of effort into their organization through my organization. You don't have to chase him. You don't have to ask him. You just call him and say, hey, this is what needs to be done. Are you okay with that? And he's like 100%, and we've got a bunch of clubs like that here in Oklahoma. We've got a club up here in northeast Oklahoma that practices up at Catoosa High School named Freestyle. Johnny Cook and Tony Cook run it. They've been wrestling coaches forever. Then you got Total Wrestling Club in Total, Oklahoma that, their high school team's on a 9-time, I believe, state championship run.
Wow.
And then you got Dayton Fix's, club there in Sand Springs. They were 6A champs last year, Team Big. Just to say a few, I mean, we've got clubs that are large that have multiple kids from different places coming. Then we've got your small rural communities that have kids that are coming that are most of them just go to their high schools or their school system. And it's just, for me as a state chairman, I can't tell you how fortunate I am because most of the people I deal with are wrestling people. So the questions they ask or the issues they have or whatever it is, it's really easy to solve because they get it.
Sure.
And I think that's one of the biggest reasons that we've had success here in the last 5 to 7 years is, number one, the communication process has definitely increased. And we're making everything as easy and logistically possible for them to not have to ask, 100 questions. They just look at our website or our Twitter site or our Facebook page or whatever, and the answers are there. And I send out a weekly email to I think 1,600 emails. I send out a weekly update every week, and a lot of that gets out through that. But I can tell you this, if anybody's asking, communication is the key. I mean, it's just the key.
Yeah. Well, the people that I know that suggested that I interview you, and that was a great suggestion. You've done a great job. They really respect and rave about your leadership style, about how inclusive you are, and and certainly you've done this in this interview, is giving credit where credit is due, and I think just as importantly is empowering those people around you. So I know you're a humble guy. The people I talked to said they didn't even know if I could get you to do the interview, but there's people listening that are in your role or trying to do things that are big like you've done. If you had a suggestion or two on how you've been able, besides I know you're going to say surround yourself with great people, but how have you been able to so effectively go from like 8 kids 7 years ago to 138 this past year? And that's just one microcosm of an example, but how have you been able to so effectively lead in the role that you're in?
Dave, before I was a coach, I was a policeman. I learned a lot of communication skills and professionalism and multiple tools to help me build relationships. And I think the main thing to do in my role is you have to develop relationships. Now, here's the problem. Some of those relationships aren't probably as positive as they could be because a lot of people are still learning the process. And, it takes a little bit for people to get it or to understand it or whatever it is. But, the thing I've learned through, my prior profession and in this is you have to be patient. You can't make snap judgments. You can't make decisions until you see all the avenues. You have to put everything together before you put a decision out there that might affect people, especially kids. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things I've learned here in the last 2 or 3 years being in this position is there's a lot of things out there that, you have and don't get me wrong, I say you got parents that are very, very intense about their son being the next, Dayton Fix or whatever it is. And sometimes you have to, let them know that the process is here. We have to follow the process. And, and chances are for him to be that good, it's probably not going to happen overnight. And, some of the things I run into, what I've learned through being a policeman, being a coach, being an administrator of a program, being a teacher is everybody's got, a preference, and you've got to meet those preferences, but sometimes you have to make a decision that probably is as positive with everybody.
Yeah, it sounds like a mix of diplomacy, patience, and straightforward communication skills, really. So
yeah, and that's one thing that I've had people say about me is, I don't pull any punches. I don't tell you what could be. I just tell you what is.
Right.
And a lot of times that gets people a little bit frustrated. But in the long run, when you're talking about stuff like this, especially when it's affecting kids, you'd rather be told exactly what it is than later on have to make, a rebuttal on why it didn't happen the way you said. And it's been a good tool for me. And again, I'm going to go ahead and say it. I've got great people. It's amazing the people I have surrounding me. And I can't tell you how fortunate I am to be in the position I am because it's not me. It's this organization. This organization is way bigger than me.
Well, you're very humble and you're very diplomatic, and I do believe obviously those folks have a lot to do with it. But at the end of the day, leaders lead; they get stuff done, and certainly you're a primary example of that. So I want to thank you for taking so much time with me today. And I'll be down there in a couple weeks at your event, and I'm covering it for Tracks. I'm excited. I'm a little nervous because my normal partner, Andy Hamilton, will be in Waterloo covering the Hall of Fame stuff that weekend. So I'll be looking for some guidance from you to make sure I do a good job. But I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down and talk to me today, Kevin.
No problem. It's my pleasure. I appreciate any time that we can get out there and increase anybody's idea of what we do around here. And I really appreciate you giving me the time to talk this morning.
No worries. It's been my pleasure. And, I'll see you in a couple of weeks. So, ladies and gentlemen, that was Kevin Crutchmer from Oklahoma. This is David Mirikitani with Matt Chat. Thank you all for listening. Talk to you next week.
This show is part of the Matt Talk Podcast Network. For more wrestling podcasts, head over to MattTalkOnline.com.